Chapter 5, My High School Years. I attended Lewiston High School, which at that time was located on Central Avenue next to the Armory. It was a beautiful red brick building and quite modern for its time. I mention the Armory because that is where we had our physical education classes and played our high school basketball games. My high school years were academically challenging, socially fun, and athletically exciting. I recall most of the subjects I studied: 4 years of English, which included reading Scott, Shakespeare, Macaulay's Lays of Ancient Rome, etc., 3 years of Latin, and 2 years of French, algebra, geometry, history, biology, chemistry, and physics. I did very well in my studies and was elected to the National Honor Society. I graduated 11th in my class of over 200. The top 10 received Norman Dion medals. I was beat out for the 10th spot by a girl named Arlene Bukulshis, who took the commercial track courses. I took the college track, which I thought was more difficult. I graduated with a 90-plus average for 4 years, which enabled me to be accepted at both Bowdoin and Colby colleges. I was not accepted to Harvard, which I'm sure disappointed my dad, until he came to realize that Bowdoin was a wonderful and most highly regarded institution of higher learning. More about my college years later. A word about my teachers at Lewiston High School. They were all, for the most part, excellent, a fact which I didn't appreciate at the time. Miss Dumais was my first-year Latin teacher and was terrific. She inspired her students and was enthusiastic about her subject. My algebra teacher was Miss Georgette LePage. She was pretty but not an excellent teacher, and it was in her class that I lost my enthusiasm for mathematics. Miss McGraw was my geometry teacher. I love geometry because I guess I've always been a visually logical person, and plane geometry with its theorems and logic were right up my alley. When the geometry tests were given to the class, Miss McGraw would give me and Carl Berkelman, a genius, separate and especially hard tests. Carl was a brilliant student who subsequently won several scholarships and went on to become a nuclear physicist and college professor. He was in a class by himself and graduated either first or second in our class. Our English teacher was Mr. Connolly. We didn't like to sit in the first row of the class because Mr. Connolly used to spray when he talked, and those in the first rows got sprayed. He used to drink buttermilk during class, and this didn't enhance his oral hygiene, his breath, or his popularity with those in the first few rows of the class. But he was a fine teacher and taught us to enjoy poetry and reading. In my sophomore year, our English teacher was Miss Huntington. She had a propensity to constantly interrupt her talking with ers and ahs. This made it difficult for the class to concentrate on what she was trying to say. We used to bet amongst ourselves how many ers she'd say in the 50 minutes allotted to her class. It was hard to concentrate on the subject matter when we were all counting the ers and ahs to see who would win. I think the record was 102, which meant she interrupted herself at least twice every minute. This was distracting to say the least. And yet it was in her class that I learned and had to memorize the quality of mercy speech from The Merchant of Venice and Macaulay's heroic Horatio at the Bridge. Mr. Buckley was my biology teacher and also the junior varsity basketball coach. His biology class was interesting. I can still recall the smell of the formaldehyde from the jars in which the frogs we dissected were stored. Phiz Witten was our chemistry and physics teacher. He was a character who loved to conduct experiments in class to emphasize what he was teaching. He'd take us to science fairs where we'd be mesmerized by such things as a goldfish being frozen solid with liquid hydrogen and then slowly thawed, and we'd watch it swim away. We saw a rubber ball frozen solid and shattered when we tried to bounce it. Phiz was a whiz and an excellent teacher. Under his tutelage, we learned of Boyle's and Charles' laws, among other basic concepts. It was under his guidance that Carl Berkelman and I entered the state science fair competition. I demonstrated how rayon was made, and Carl expostulated on the theory of evolution. Carl won first prize. I didn't win anything, but had fun competing with kids from all over the state of Maine. Miss McHugh was our history teacher. She was also the drama coach along with Miss Butler. She was a very good history instructor and a first-class drama coach. Sports played a major role in my high school life. I was a fairly good athlete and made the varsity basketball and tennis teams. Johnny Dixon was our basketball coach and introduced fast break basketball to LHS. We had very good teams my junior and senior years and made the playoff tournaments each year, but failed to win a state championship. I played both the guard and forward positions and was very good defensively and only fair at offense. I was a very aggressive player who dove for loose balls and fought for every rebound, but I did lack finesse and usually fouled out of games. My younger cousin Erwin Cohen said he used to bet with his friends as to when I'd foul out. Our offense relied mainly on the Soroy brothers. Ray Soroy was an exceptionally fine scorer and athlete and eventually won a full scholarship to play at the University of Cincinnati. He also won the state foul shooting contest by sinking 98 of 100. My brother Mickey preceded me by 2 years on the team and was a much better player than I was. He had many great games for LHS, and I kept a scrapbook of all his exploits on the court. Both Mickey and I belonged to Young Judea, and we formed a team with the Portland Jewish Community Center team to represent Maine in the New England Young Judea basketball tournament. We won that tournament, which was held in Rhode Island, and as a consequence, were invited to participate in the Nationals. The Nationals were held at a Young Judea camp in Zelienople, Pennsylvania. Some of the Jewish businessmen in Lewiston raised money to send the team. The team was comprised of Mickey, Mark Cohen, Marty Levine, Ray Zelch, Gil Shapiro, and me from Lewiston, and Maurice Weissman, Phil Nechtow, Dave Molko, and others whose names I can't recall from Portland. We rode by train and bus to Zelienople, where we faced a team from New Jersey in the finals. The game was played on an outdoor court with steel backboards and chains on the baskets in lieu of nets. The New Jersey team was larger than us and came in as cocky favorites. Mickey devised our strategy, which was to employ the Chevrolet tee on defense. The New Jerseyites had never been confronted with this type of defense and wilted under its pressure. The Chevrolet tee was named after the defense that Chevrolet High School in Portland used. It consisted of a front defensive chaser who ran after the ball wherever it was located and harassed the ball handler. We substituted freely and always had a fresh chaser at the head of the tee. Meanwhile, we used a fast break offense, and Mickey led us with his scoring. I did unusually well offensively and scored 12 points. We won the National Judea Championship and were feted when we arrived back home. It was a great feeling. I had an active social life while in high school and dated several girls. The one I liked most was a girl named Terry Eccles, but my parents encouraged me to go out with Jewish girls. All the Jewish girls were my friends, and I never felt romantically toward them. Those in my age group were Janice Levine, Elaine Goldman, Sandy Rosenthal, Dolly White, Adele Brody, Judy Pritzker, Harriet Goldman, and Ruthie Supovitz. Ruthie was the bravest person I ever met. She lost a leg to cancer when in her junior year, and I recall how moving it was at our graduation as she limped pale and wan on crutches with her one leg down the aisle to receive her diploma. She died shortly thereafter. One of the more memorable events at LHS was the senior prom. The theme for our prom was an Indian motif. I was somehow on the decorating committee with Anne Malloy, who was captain of the cheerleaders, Connie Joy, and Claudie Nadeau. We all piled into an old car, I don't remember whose, and drove up to Camp Lown in Oakland, Maine, where we borrowed a totem pole. We stopped in Winthrop for a hamburger, and after we had all eaten and the check was presented, we realized none of us had much money with us. Somehow, we gave the restaurant all we had and talked our way out of a most embarrassing situation. We arrived back in Lewiston with the totem pole intact and sticking out the front of the car. It became the centerpiece of our decorations. I think we returned it to Camp Lown, but my memory is hazy on that point. The youth of the Lewiston Auburn Jewish community and those of Portland Jewish community often held social activities together. The Jewish boys in Lewiston belonged to a fraternity called Phi Delta Mu. The girls belonged to a sorority called Iota Phi. Companion fraternities and sororities were extant in Portland. When dances were sponsored by either group, the corresponding organizations were invited. Portland is located about 25 miles south of Lewiston. I attended a dance in Portland sponsored by the Portland Iota Phi sorority. My date was a girl from Portland by the name of Marilyn Schwartz. Her brother Lou was a friend of mine and later a fraternity brother at Bowdoin College. During one of the breaks between sets, I noticed Owen Greenblatt with an attractive date. I knew Owen from Camp Lowndes, so I went over to say hello. He introduced me to his date, a shy, beautiful girl with glasses named Diana Guerin. Something about Diana struck a very responsive chord in me. The meeting was brief, and then I returned to my date and spent the rest of the evening wondering who this Diana was. I was 16 years old at the time. Unlike the promiscuity of today's youth, my folks always admonished me to be a gentleman when I went on dates, and although I had all the natural urges and hormones of a teenager, I honored the dates I was with by seldom going beyond the kissing stages and never beyond mild petting. I'm sure my dates also had raging hormones, but we were all brought up in those days to respect the other person's privacy and dignity. I've often wondered if I knew then what I know now, if I would have been more sexually active. I once had a date with a girl from Portland nicknamed Rita the Heater. We made out in the car, but never progressed beyond kissing and hugging. So much for misnomers. One of the more memorable events while in high school was the time Marv Cates, Dana Larrabee, Bob Setlin, and I drove down to Boston to see the play Mr. Roberts. I think Dana supplied the car, as my folks had only one car, and I didn't get to use it very often. After the play, we decided to go to the Old Howard, a famous burlesque theater in Boston. We were treated to a revealing striptease show featuring a dancer named Rose LaRose. On the way home, we stopped at a beach dance hall, I don't recall which beach, and picked up a few girls who needed rides home. The girl I offered to drop off at home was named Alice Dudash from Shawsheen Village near Lawrence, Massachusetts. She was a short, extremely well-proportioned girl and was wearing a skimpy yellow bathing suit. She sat on my lap, wiggling and causing natural biological responses in me all the way to her house. There were 7 of us jammed into the car, which I guess was a good thing, and kept us all from engaging in more advanced sexual activities. It proved the old maxim, there is safety in numbers. When I graduated from high school, I was still a virgin. During the summer months while I was in high school, I worked in both my father's shoe factory, Maine Shoes on Spring Street Extension in Auburn, Maine, and later in Belgrade Shoe Company in the stockroom. The pay was initially 30 cents an hour, but by the time I was a senior, I made 50 cents an hour, or as much as $30 a week if I logged overtime. I was accepted to Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine, and spent the summer prior to matriculating working at the Balsams Hotel in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire. It was a fancy resort, but the help was forbidden to mingle with the guests. My job was loading and unloading heavy foodstuffs on a platform to which delivery trucks backed up. The temperatures on the platform rose to 90-plus degrees at times. Once the cargo was stacked on the platform, I had to cart it into a walk-in refrigerator room, which was frigid. I got sick before the summer was over. On a day off from work, I hitchhiked from New Hampshire to Bath, Maine, where I chanced to run into Owen Greenblatt. He was the guy whose date was Diana Guerin at the Portland dance. I didn't remember Diana's name and asked Owen if he still was dating that pretty girl from Portland. He said no and gave me her name and address. When back at the Balsams, I was feeling pretty sorry for myself, isolated and hard at work, so I decided to write a note to this Diana Guerin. I explained that I was the guy she was introduced to at the Iota Phi dance she attended with Owen Greenblatt, and that I'd like to correspond with her. I did not expect a response, but Diana answered my letter, and we began a long-distance friendly correspondence. It wasn't until several months later that I actually met her again at a party at Lou Schwartz's house in Portland. I might mention here that my father was extremely active in the Jewish community in Lewiston and spearheaded the development and construction of a Jewish community center in Lewiston. Phil Lown provided most of the financing. My dad was elected president of the Jewish Community Center and gave a memorable speech at the laying of the cornerstone of the new building. I said a few words on behalf of the Jewish youth of Lewiston/Auburn. The family had a recording of the speeches provided by radio station WCOU, but over the years and many moves, it seems to have been lost. After the community center was completed, we spent many an hour playing basketball in its gym and bowling in its duckpin alleys. Our club meetings were held there also.